The discovery. The mining vessel Crimson Horizon drifted through the asteroid field of Sector 47, its hull scarred from decades of deep space operations. Captain Ryland Voss stood at the bridge viewport, watching the automated drones carve into a particularly large asteroid. His crew of 12 had been working this field for 6 months, and they were 2 weeks from heading home to Earth. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Neera Chin, the ship's scanner operator. Her dark eyes were wide with confusion as she stared at her console. Ryland crossed the bridge in 3 long strides. "What am I looking at? There's something inside that asteroid. Not mineral deposits. This signature is artificial." The crew gathered around as Neera's scans revealed a structure buried deep within the rock, too geometric to be natural, too old to be human. Ryland made the call to investigate. The drones shifted their cutting pattern, carefully peeling away layers of ancient stone until a doorway emerged, covered in symbols no human had ever seen. 24 hours later, Ryland and his team stood inside an underground chamber that defied belief. The walls were lined with crystalline displays that flickered to life as they entered, projecting holographic star maps and what appeared to be historical records. Engineer Marcus Webb touched one of the crystals, and the entire room transformed. "These are records," whispered Dr. Asha Kimura, the expedition's xenoarchaeologist. "A database of some kind. What they discovered over the next 3 days would shake humanity to its core." The records told of an empire that had ruled the galaxy 10,000 years ago, the Valdran Ascendancy. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, all united under one banner. But the records also revealed something else. Humanity's homeworld, Earth, was marked with a special designation. A quarantine world. A prison planet. According to the ancient files, humans were not native to Earth. They had been exiled there millennia ago by the Valdran Empire for an act of rebellion so devastating that it nearly brought the entire galactic civilization to its knees. The records were incomplete, corrupted by time, but one phrase appeared again and again in the translated text: the breakers of chains. Ryland transmitted their findings to Earth Command, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had just learned it wasn't alone in the universe, and that they had a history far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The truth spreads. The news hit Earth like a meteor strike. Within hours of the Crimson Horizon's report reaching Earth Command, encrypted transmissions began bouncing between government agencies, military installations and research facilities. Within days, despite all attempts at containment, the truth leaked to the public. Commander Elena Frost stood in the Situation Room beneath UNSA headquarters in Geneva, watching the global chaos unfold on dozens of screens. Protests, celebrations, panic, and wonder erupted across every continent. Some called it humanity's greatest discovery. Others declared it proof of ancient conspiracy theories. Religious leaders debated the theological implications while scientists scrambled to verify the findings. "We need to send a proper expedition," argued Dr. Kimura, who had been rushed from the asteroid site to Earth to present her findings. "That database contains coordinates for other Valdran sites, including what appears to be a major hub just 40 light-years from here." 40 light-years might as well be 40 million with our current propulsion systems, countered Admiral James Kordov, his weathered face grim. "Our fastest ships would take centuries to reach it." "Then we accelerate Project Horizon," Elena said firmly. Project Horizon, humanity's experimental faster-than-light drive, still in theoretical stages. If the Valdran could travel between stars, their technology might show us how. The decision was made. Earth's resources would be pooled into a single mission: reach the Valdran hub, learn the truth about humanity's past, and discover what had happened to the Galactic Empire that had once ruled the stars. 6 months later, the Pathfinder launched from lunar orbit. It was humanity's most advanced vessel, cobbled together from every nation's best technology and powered by a prototype FTL drive reverse-engineered from the Valdran database fragments. The crew numbered 200. Soldiers, scientists, engineers, and diplomats. Leading them was Captain Ryland Voss, the man who had started it all. The FTL jump felt like being turned inside out and stretched across infinity. When the Pathfinder dropped back into normal space, the crew found themselves staring at a massive space station orbiting a dead star. The Valdran hub was larger than Earth's moon, a construct of impossible architecture that somehow remained powered after 10,000 years of abandonment. "Life support is active," reported Neera Chin from her scanner station. "Atmosphere, gravity, even the lights still work in some sections." "Any signs of life?" Ryland asked. "None. The place is a tomb." They docked with the station and began their exploration. The corridors were vast, designed for beings both larger and smaller than humans. Some sections appeared built for zero-gravity movement, while others suggested a civilization that valued art and beauty as much as function. And everywhere there were more databases, more records, more pieces of the puzzle. Dr. Kimura's team worked around the clock to access the archives. What they found painted a picture of a golden age. The Valdran Empire at its height had been a beacon of cooperation among thousands of species. But the records also spoke of growing tensions, of certain species demanding independence, of whispers about a group called the Breakers who rejected the Empire's authority. Then they found the classified files, sealed behind encryption that took Marcus Webb 3 weeks to crack. The truth was devastating. Humans hadn't just rebelled against the Valdran Empire. They had weaponized something the Empire held sacred, a technology that connected all Valdran worlds through a network of faster-than-light communication gates. Humanity's ancestors had turned that network into a weapon, using it to broadcast a signal that shut down every Valdran gate simultaneously, fragmenting the Empire overnight and stranding billions of beings light-years from home. The Empire had collapsed into chaos. Wars erupted. Civilizations fell. And the humans responsible were hunted down, their homeworld located and quarantined, their FTL capabilities stripped away, their memories altered through generational bioprogramming to ensure they would never remember what they had done. "We destroyed an entire galactic civilization," Dr. Kimura whispered, staring at the translated records. "Our ancestors committed genocide on an unimaginable scale. But the records also contained a warning: the quarantine wouldn't last forever. The Valdran failsafes were designed to expire after 10,000 years. When humanity inevitably rediscovered space travel, the galaxy would be watching, judging, and possibly seeking revenge. The Watchers." The discovery of humanity's crimes sent shockwaves through the Pathfinder's crew. Some demanded they destroy the evidence and return home. Others argued that the galaxy deserved to know humans had returned to space. Captain Voss made the decision to continue their mission. If other civilizations had survived the fall, humanity needed to know what they were facing. Dr. Kimura's team uncovered coordinates for 17 worlds marked as high-probability survivors in the Valdran database. Planets with robust ecosystems and populations large enough to weather the Empire's collapse. The closest was a world designated Corelli's Prime, just 12 light-years away. The Pathfinder made the jump. What they found exceeded every expectation. Corelli's Prime orbited a blue giant star, its surface covered in sprawling cities connected by orbital elevators and atmospheric transit tubes. The technology was clearly post-Valdran, different architecture, different energy signatures, but unmistakably advanced. Thousands of ships moved through orbital traffic lanes with practiced efficiency. "They know we're here," reported Nira, watching her scanner display fill with tracking locks. 67 vessels have changed course to intercept. They're not broadcasting any hostile intent, but they're definitely coming to meet us. The lead ship was a sleek cruiser 3 times the Pathfinder's size. A transmission came through, audio and visual, in a language that the Valdran translation algorithms struggled to parse before finding common ground. The alien who appeared on screen was humanoid but distinctly non-human. Her skin held a faint iridescent shimmer, and her eyes were solid gold without visible pupils. She wore formal attire adorned with symbols that matched those found in the Valdran archives. "Vessel from Sol System," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords. "I am High Arbiter Thesha Kane of the Corelli Sovereignty. Your arrival was anticipated. The ancient warnings were quite specific about your kind." Rylan stepped forward. "I'm Captain Rylan Voss of Earth. We come in peace. We've only recently learned about the Valdran Empire and our people's history with the fall," Thesha interrupted, her expression unreadable. "Yes. Your species is remembered, Captain Voss. The breakers of chains. The shatters of gates. The civilization that murdered billions and condemned the galaxy to 10,000 years of darkness and isolation." The bridge fell silent. Finally Rylan spoke. "We had no knowledge of these events. Our historical records begin only a few thousand years ago. If our ancestors committed these crimes, the current generation of humanity was never told." Thesha studied him for a long moment. "The quarantine protocols included memory suppression across generations. This is known. What concerns the sovereignty, and the other survivor civilizations monitoring this transmission, is whether modern humanity carries the same destructive tendencies as your forebears." "Other civilizations?" Elena Frost asked. "How many survived?" "Of the 3,000 species that comprise the Valdran Empire, approximately 400 managed to maintain interstellar capacity after the fall. Another 600 exist in pre-spaceflight states on their homeworlds. The rest. Thesha's expression darkened. Extinction. Technological collapse. Reversion to pre-industrial states. Your ancestors' actions ended more than individual lives, Captain. They ended entire evolutionary lines. A new voice cut through the transmission. Another alien, this one reptilian with crystalline scales. High Arbiter, the Council demands we take them into custody immediately. They cannot be allowed to roam freely. The Council will be patient, Commander Zrask, Thesha replied calmly. Captain Voss, you and your command staff are invited to Corrales Prime for a formal hearing before the Sovereignty Council. This is not optional, but I give you my word that no harm will come to you or your crew if you cooperate. Ryland looked at his officers. They had come seeking answers. Now they would face judgment for crimes committed by ancestors they had never known. But turning back was impossible. Earth needed to know what waited for them among the stars. We accept your invitation, High Arbiter. The Council's judgment. The Sovereignty's capital city was called Silvaris, a metropolis of crystalline towers and floating gardens that defied Earth's understanding of engineering. The Pathfinder's crew was escorted to a diplomatic facility that was equal parts museum and prison, comfortable but clearly under guard. Ryland, Elena, Dr. Kimura and Marcus Webb were brought before the Sovereignty Council, a gathering of representatives from 37 different species. The chamber was vast, its walls lined with holographic displays showing real-time feeds from across the Sovereignty's territory. Each council member sat in a specialized environment pod designed for their specific biology. Some in water, others in methane atmospheres, one in what appeared to be a containment field of pure energy. High Arbiter Thesha Kane presided from a central dais. Captain Voss, your species stands accused of crimes committed 10 millennia ago. While we understand you personally bear no responsibility for these actions, the galaxy must determine whether humanity should be allowed to rejoin interstellar civilization. For 3 days the hearing continued. The Council presented evidence from their own archives, testimonies from survivors of the fall, documented accounts of civilizations that had crumbled, even recovered data from Valdran worlds that had become graveyards when their gate networks failed and supply lines collapsed. One testimony came from an ancient holographic recording, a Valdran official from the final days of the Empire. The humans called themselves freedom fighters, the alien said, his form flickering with age and data corruption. They claimed the Empire had become tyrannical, that the gate network gave us too much control over member species. They said they were liberating the galaxy. Instead they shattered it. Dr. Kimura was given the opportunity to present humanity's side. She stood before the council, her voice steady despite the weight of history pressing down on her. We cannot defend what our ancestors did. But I ask this council to consider, would your species not fight if they believe themselves enslaved? The records we found suggest humanity was taken from another world, placed on Earth against their will, and forbidden from ever reaching the stars. That doesn't justify genocide, nothing could, but it explains desperation. A council member from a species that resembled floating jellyfish pulsed with bioluminescence. Your species was not enslaved. The quarantine was punishment for a previous crime. Humanity was part of the Valdran Empire as willing members for 2,000 years before the incident that led to their exile. What incident? Ryland demanded. Thesha accessed a sealed file, and new information flooded the displays. Humanity's original crime had been industrial espionage and technological theft on a massive scale. They had stolen proprietary terraforming technology from another species and used it to colonize 17 worlds without permission, triggering a resource war that killed millions. The quarantine had been the Empire's attempt at rehabilitation rather than extinction. Our ancestors were criminals twice over, Elena said quietly. First thieves, then mass murderers. The revelation sent ripples through both the Council and the human delegation. But Marcus Webb, who had been reviewing technical data throughout the hearing, spoke up. The gate network shouldn't have been vulnerable to what the humans did. I've studied the Valdran technology. Their systems had redundancies, failsafes, distributed control. For humanity to weaponize the network the way they did, someone with deep access to the Empire's core infrastructure would have had to help them. The chamber erupted in debate. Several council members accused Marcus of deflection, but others seemed intrigued. Thesha called for order. Engineer Webb's point is noted. There have long been theories that humanity had allies within the Empire, dissident factions who used the Breakers as a weapon against their own government. Commander Zrask, the reptilian officer who had spoken during first contact, hissed angrily. Conspiracies and speculation. The fact remains, Humanity destroyed the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. They should be quarantined again, their FTL capabilities stripped, their homeworld monitored for another 10,000 years. But not all council members agreed. A member from a species that resembled large, intelligent avians spoke in rapid clicks that the translators rendered as, "The Valdran Empire was not perfect. Many species chafed under its control. Perhaps the humans were merely the spark that ignited a fire that was already burning." The council's vote was split. Half demanded renewed quarantine. Half argued for probationary integration, allowing humanity to exist as a monitored species within the galactic community, their actions watched for signs of aggression. High Arbiter Thesha broke the tie. "Humanity will be given a choice," she announced. "Return to Earth, accept isolation, and we will leave you in peace. Or join the sovereignty as probationary members, with restrictions on your expansion, oversight of your technology, and the understanding that any act of aggression will result in immediate and total embargo." She looked directly at Ryland. "You have 24 hours to decide humanity's future, Captain Voss." The choice. The human delegation gathered in their quarters aboard the Sovereignty facility, the weight of an entire species' future pressing down on them. Ryland stood at the window, watching ships move through Silvaris's orbital traffic patterns, a glimpse of the greater galaxy humanity could join or lose forever. "We can't make this decision for Earth," Elena said, pacing the room. "We're explorers, not representatives. This needs to go back to the UN, to the various governments." "There isn't time," Dr. Kimura interrupted. "Communication with Earth takes days, even with the Valdran relay technology we've been given access to. By the time we get a response, the Council's offer might be withdrawn." Marcus Webb sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by holographic projections of Valdran technology he'd been studying. "I've been analyzing the Sovereignty's current tech base. They're advanced, but they're not expanding. Every civilization here is focused on maintaining what they have, not growing. The fall traumatized them. They've become risk-averse. Can you blame them?" Nirachin asked from her position by the door. "They watched their entire civilization collapse. Of course they're cautious." A new voice joined the conversation. High Arbiter Thesha Kane appeared via holographic projection, having been granted access to their private quarters. The humans tensed, but she raised a hand in a gesture that seemed universally peaceful. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe you deserve context that the Council would prefer I not share." She glanced around as if checking for surveillance. "The Sovereignty is dying, Captain Voss. Not quickly but inevitably. We have maintained our technology, our worlds, our civilization, but we have lost something vital. We have lost the ability to dream." She gestured, and new displays appeared: demographic data, innovation indices, cultural vitality measurements. All showed downward trends across every sovereignty species. "The fall broke something in us. We survived, but at the cost of our ambition. Birth rates decline. Artistic movements stagnate. Scientific breakthroughs become rarer each generation. We are a civilization in managed decline." "What does this have to do with humanity?" Ryland asked. "Everything," Thesha said. "Do you know what your species has accomplished in 10,000 years of isolation? You went from Stone Age technology to spaceflight in roughly 6,000 years. The Valdran Empire took 40,000 years to achieve the same progress. You are, for better or worse, a species that refuses to accept limitations." She moved closer to Ryland's projection. "The Council is terrified of you, and rightly so. But some of us believe you might be exactly what the galaxy needs. A species with humanity's drive, tempered by knowledge of what unchecked ambition can destroy, could revitalize the Sovereignty. Or you could repeat your ancestors' mistakes and destroy us all." "Why are you telling us this?" Elena asked suspiciously. "Because I believe in informed choices," Thesha replied. "If you choose isolation, humanity will be safe but stagnant. Earth will develop in its own bubble, but when you eventually venture out again in another 1,000 years, you may find nothing but ruins and dying worlds. If you choose integration, you will be restricted, watched, resented by many, but you will have the chance to prove that humanity has evolved beyond its violent past." She prepared to disconnect. "There is a third option, though the Council did not present it. Several independent worlds exist beyond sovereignty space. Survivors who rejected integration after the fall and built their own civilizations. They are rougher, more chaotic, but also more free. You could seek them out instead." The projection faded, leaving the humans in silence. Finally, Dr. Kimura spoke. "She's right about the stagnation. I've seen it in the archaeological records. Pre-fall Valdran culture was vibrant, constantly evolving. Modern sovereignty culture feels like a living museum. So what do we do? Nira asked. Join the sovereignty and accept being second-class citizens? Return to Earth and hide from the galaxy? Or go rogue and risk making enemies of everyone? Ryland turned from the window, his decision made. We do what humans do best. We take the hard path that no one else wants to walk. 24 hours later, Captain Voss stood before the Sovereignty Council once more. We accept your offer of probationary membership, he announced. But with a counter-proposal. Humanity will join the sovereignty, accept your restrictions and oversight. In exchange, we ask for full access to Valdran historical records, permission to contact the independent worlds, and the right to advocate for policy changes within the council system. Commander Zrask's scales bristled. You presume to negotiate after what your kind did? I presume to offer what the sovereignty needs, Ryland said firmly. We studied your demographic data, your innovation rates, your cultural indices. You're not dying because of resource shortages or external threats. You're dying because you've become too afraid to take risks. Humanity can't fix that, but maybe we can remind you what taking risks looks like. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some called it arrogance. Others saw possibility. High Arbiter Thesha called for a vote, and by the narrowest margin, the council accepted humanity's counterproposal. Then let it be recorded, Thesha declared. Humanity is granted probationary membership in the Corelli's sovereignty, subject to the terms discussed. Welcome back to the stars, Captain Voss. Try not to break them this time. First Contact Wars. The Pathfinder returned to Earth carrying news that divided humanity. Some celebrated joining the galactic community. Others protested the restrictions and oversight. Protests erupted in major cities, with demonstrators demanding either full independence or complete isolation. But Earth's governments understood the reality. Humanity had been given a second chance, and squandering it meant condemning Earth to technological quarantine or worse. Within months, joint human sovereignty research facilities were established on Luna and Mars. Sovereignty observers took up residence in every major spaceport. The terms were strict but clear. Humans could explore, trade, and establish limited colonies, but military expansion was forbidden and all new technology required sovereignty approval. For 2 years the integration proceeded smoothly. Human traders began establishing routes between Earth and sovereignty worlds. Cultural exchanges brought alien art, literature, and philosophy to Earth while introducing human creativity to species that hadn't seen genuine innovation in generations. Dr. Kimura led archaeological expeditions to dead Valdran worlds, recovering lost knowledge. Marcus Webb worked with sovereignty engineers to improve FTL drive efficiency. Then came the incident at Theros Station. Theros was an independent trading post in unclaimed space, one of the wild settlements Thesha had mentioned. It served as a gray market hub where sovereignty citizens could acquire goods and technology their governments restricted. Captain Ryland Voss, now promoted to admiral and serving as Earth's primary sovereignty liaison, had received reports of human smugglers operating from Theros and went to investigate personally. What he found was worse than smuggling. A rogue faction of human colonists, calling themselves the New Frontier Movement, had established a secret base in the Theros sector. They had been reverse engineering Valdran weapons technology and selling it to the highest bidder, including species hostile to the sovereignty. You're selling weapons to the galaxy's criminals, Ryland confronted their leader, a former UNSA officer named Director Cale Brennan. Do you understand what you're doing? Brennan, a scarred veteran of Earth's corporate wars, smiled coldly. I'm doing what humanity does best, refusing to be controlled. The sovereignty wants to keep us weak and dependent. I'm ensuring humans have the strength to stand on their own when the sovereignty inevitably turns on us. They're giving us a chance to prove we've changed. They're giving us a leash, Brennan corrected. And the moment we pull too hard, they'll put us down. I've read the histories, Admiral. Every species that joined the Valdran Empire eventually lost its autonomy. The sovereignty is the same system with a different name. Before Ryland could respond, alarms blared throughout Theros Station. Ships were jumping into the sector, not sovereignty vessels but warships from the Kryn Dominion, one of the independent powers that had refused integration after the fall. The Kryn were insectoid, aggressive, and they had just purchased a significant weapons shipment from Brennan's organization. They're supposed to arrive tomorrow, Brennan said, confused. Plans change, replied the Kryn commander over the station's communication system. You have technology we want. We'll take it all, including your ships and personnel. Thank you for gathering everything in one convenient location. The Kryn attack was swift and brutal. Their ships tore through Theros Station's minimal defenses, boarding parties streaming into the habitat sections. Brennan's people fought back, but they were traitors and smugglers, not soldiers. The station's civilian population was caught in the crossfire. Ryland made the call that would define his career. He activated the Pathfinder's weapons systems, technically a violation of sovereignty restrictions, and engaged the Kryn warships. The battle was fierce. Human ingenuity clashed with Kryn aggression, and the fight spread across the sector as more ships arrived. Sovereignty peacekeepers, independent salvagers, even pirates hoping to loot the chaos. Elena Frost, now commanding the newly commissioned Horizon Runner, arrived with a squadron of human vessels operating under sovereignty authority. Together they pushed the Kryn back, but at significant cost. Theros Station was crippled, thousands were dead, and humanity had just participated in its first interstellar combat since the fall. The aftermath was immediate and severe. The Sovereignty Council convened an emergency session. Commander Zrask demanded humanity's expulsion, citing the weapons trading and unauthorized military action as evidence that humans couldn't be trusted. But High Arbiter Thesha surprised everyone by defending humanity's actions. Admiral Voss violated protocol, yes. But he did so to protect civilians and stop the spread of destabilizing weapons technology. Human smugglers created the problem, but human warriors solved it. The debate raged for days. Some council members saw Theros as proof that humanity should remain restricted. Others, particularly younger representatives from species tired of the sovereignty's conservative approach, saw it differently. For 10,000 years, we have avoided conflict through appeasement and withdrawal, argued council member Lyrics, the avian representative who had spoken in humanity's defense before. The Kryn grow bolder because they know we won't fight. Perhaps it's time we remembered that peace sometimes requires the willingness to defend it. The council voted to maintain humanity's probationary status, but with a twist. Earth would be allowed to establish a defensive peacekeeping force under Joint Human Sovereignty Command. It was a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but it kept humanity in the galactic community while acknowledging the reality that the galaxy beyond sovereignty borders was dangerous. Director Brennan was arrested and transported to Earth to face trial. But his words haunted Ryland: "They'll turn on us eventually. And when they do, I hope you're ready." The New Rebellion. 3 years after the Theros incident, humanity had established itself as the sovereignty's most dynamic and controversial member species. Human colonies dotted authorized territories, human ships patrolled sovereignty borders alongside alien peacekeepers, and human culture had begun influencing the broader galactic community in ways both inspiring and troubling to the established powers. But tensions were rising. The Kryn Dominion had been making aggressive moves, absorbing smaller independent worlds and building what appeared to be a significant military fleet. Intelligence reports suggested they had reverse-engineered more Valdran technology, possibly from sources beyond the weapons they'd acquired at Theros. The sovereignty's response was to fortify borders and issue diplomatic protests, strategies that had worked for maintaining peace for 10,000 years. Admiral Ryland Voss, now commanding the Joint Human Sovereignty Peacekeeping Fleet, wasn't convinced. "They're probing our defenses," he told High Arbiter Thesha during a secure transmission. "Testing our response times, mapping our patrol routes. This is what military powers do before launching an offensive." Thesha appeared weary, her iridescent skin dulled by stress. "The Council will not authorize preemptive action. We learned that lesson from the fall. Aggressive postures lead to escalation. Sometimes escalation is already happening, and pretending otherwise just ensures you're unprepared when it arrives." Before Thesha could respond, alarms sounded across the sovereignty's border networks. The Kryn weren't probing anymore, they were invading. 12 sovereignty worlds came under simultaneous attack, their orbital defenses overwhelmed by Kryn warships using Valdran-era weapons that shouldn't have existed. The sovereignty mobilized, but centuries of peace had atrophied their military readiness. Ships took hours to deploy. Command structures struggled to coordinate responses. The Kryn had counted on this. They struck fast, established beachheads, and began fortifying captured worlds before the sovereignty could mount effective counterattacks. Humanity's response was different. Earth's defensive peacekeeping force, trained by veterans who remembered when wars were fought for resources and survival rather than political posturing, deployed within minutes. Captain Elena Frost led a rapid response team to the besieged world of Polaros, evacuating civilians while holding off Kryn ground forces. Marcus Webb remotely hacked Kryn communications, feeding intelligence to sovereignty commanders. Dr. Kimura used her knowledge of Valdran architecture to help defenders turn ancient structures into fortresses. The contrast was stark. Where sovereignty forces hesitated, humans acted. Where traditional commanders requested council authorization for tactical decisions, human officers made judgment calls in real time. Where established protocols created bottlenecks, human improvisation found solutions. It was effective. It was also terrifying to species who remembered what happened the last time humans operated without restraint. The war's turning point came at the Battle of Corrales Prime itself. The Kryn launched a desperate assault on the sovereignty capital, bringing their entire fleet in a gambit to decapitate the government. It should have succeeded. The sovereignty's home fleet was designed for defense and ceremony, not large-scale combat. But Admiral Voss had prepared for this possibility. He'd quietly positioned human vessels throughout the system, disguised as civilian traffic. When the Kryn fleet arrived, they found themselves in a trap. The battle was brutal. Ships burned in the void. Stations evacuated. And in the chaos, Ryland made a decision that echoed across the centuries. He targeted the Kryn command ship not with conventional weapons, but with a modified version of the gate network disruption technology that humanity's ancestors had weaponized 10,000 years ago. The pulse knocked out the Kryn fleet's communications, leaving them deaf, blind, and uncoordinated. Sovereignty forces, prepared for the disruption, pressed their advantage. Within hours, the Kryn offensive collapsed. Victory came with consequences. The Sovereignty Council convened immediately, and Commander Zrask's accusations were savage. Voss used the same technology that destroyed the Valdran Empire. This is proof that humanity hasn't changed. They're still willing to weaponize anything for victory. The chamber erupted. Some demanded Ryland's arrest. Others celebrated him as a hero. The galaxy held its breath, watching to see if the sovereignty would tear itself apart over the same questions that had destroyed the Valdran Empire. How much freedom is too much? When does security become tyranny? Who decides? High Arbiter Thesha called for silence. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of history. Admiral Voss did use Valdran technology as a weapon. He did so against an enemy actively invading our worlds, and he did so with precision that disabled rather than destroyed. His actions saved millions of lives. She looked around the council chamber. For 10,000 years, we have defined ourselves by what we lost in the fall. We became a civilization of survivors, focused on preservation rather than progress. But perhaps that's the wrong lesson. Perhaps the fall taught us to fear strength rather than to use it wisely. She turned to Ryland, who stood at the center of the chamber, still in his battle-worn uniform. Humanity's ancestors broke the galaxy. But their descendants helped save it. The question before this council is not whether humans can be dangerous. Every species with technology can be dangerous. The question is whether we trust them to be partners rather than prisoners. The vote was closer than anyone expected. When the results came in, humanity's probationary status was lifted. Earth would become a full member of the sovereignty, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. But not everyone accepted the decision. Commander Zrask resigned from the council, joining a coalition of species who felt the sovereignty had become too influenced by human aggression. Several worlds declared independence, seeking their own path between the sovereignty and the Kryn. The galactic landscape was shifting, and humanity stood at the center of the change. Epilogue, 10 years later. Captain Nira Chin commanded the Starbreaker, a joint human sovereignty exploration vessel pushing into uncharted regions of the galaxy. Her mission was simple: find and contact species that had survived the fall in isolation, offering them the choice to join the new galactic community or remain independent. The old Valdran database had contained thousands of quarantined worlds, species deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable, or too young to join the Empire. Now those quarantines were being lifted, one by one. "What do you think we'll find out here?" asked her first officer, a young Corrales navigator named Theron. Nira smiled, watching the stars stream past as they prepared for another FTL jump. "Hopefully species that will teach us something new. Maybe some that will challenge us. Definitely some that will surprise us. Aren't you worried? The sovereignty is still recovering from the war. We're stretched thin. We're always stretched thin. Humanity spent 10,000 years isolated on one world, convinced we were alone. Now we know better. The galaxy is vast, complicated, and full of people trying to figure out how to live together without destroying each other." She looked at Theron. "That's not a problem to solve, it's a condition to manage. And I'd rather be out here managing it than sitting at home pretending it doesn't exist." The Starbreaker jumped to FTL, disappearing into the vast darkness between stars. Behind them, the sovereignty continued its slow transformation, shaped by humanity's ambition, tempered by the lessons of the fall, and guided by the hope that this time, they could build something that would last. The galaxy had been broken once. Maybe it could be healed. Or maybe humanity would break it again. Only time would tell.